Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. USC LSU roster battle heading into what I think is probably the most exciting week one matchup that we are going to get Sunday night. LSU USC, extremely exciting. Not necessarily a preview and prediction show, more just talking about how these two rosters match up against one another. Extremely excited to get into this one, and two teams that are in eerily similar positions heading into this matchup, right? You have two head coaches that are going into year three. Both teams are replacing Heisman winning quarterbacks in Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. But probably the most exciting storyline for both of these programs, both revolutionizing the defensive side of the football, the additions of Danton Lynn and Blake Baker. Very excited to get into it. Two teams we've talked a lot about this offseason. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and a massive shout out to both the USC and LSU fans. Both of us, I'm repping USC, Dill's repping LSU. Cannot thank you guys enough for all the support y'all have shown the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and much more importantly, let it fly in the comment section. Whether you agree or disagree with some of our takes, let it fly. Whether you're mixing it up with some opposing fans, that's what college football is about. Let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. And Dill, I'm going to kick it off to you. Let's start with this quarterback room. Garrett Nussmeier, Miller Moss, who you taking here?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for two teams that need to replace Heisman-level guys, I mean, I think both are pretty comfortable with what they have coming in.
Yeah,
I'll give the slight edge to Nussmeier just because you've seen it a little more over the past 2 years. You've seen him play. Again, both played really nice bowl games through Nussmeier. See him in back against Georgia in 2022. I think you just have a little bit more to go off than what Miller Moss has with USC. But again, when both got their shot, both really shine. So again, it's two units that you don't feel that you're very confident.
I think that both fan bases are extremely excited for Nuss and Miller Moss. I'm going to go with you as well and Garrett Nussmeier. Now, I'll caveat and say, think of Miller Moss's performance against Louisville in that bowl game was probably the most impressive performance that either of these quarterbacks have. I mean, that was a very good Louisville defense. Miller Moss diced him up, threw for 5 touchdowns, but you just seen a little bit more from Garrett Nussmeier heading into 2024. So I'll give the slight edge to Garrett Nussmeier, but again, two fan bases that are about as confident as you can be replacing two of the better quarterbacks that we've seen in the last decade in college football. Going to the wide receiver room, and this is where you probably have two of the most talented wide receiver rooms in college football heading into 2024. I'll give you the first word here. Who are you taking USC, LSU's wide receiver room?
No, I love the talent USC has in that room. I mean, you look at 4 true sophomores, in my opinion, led by Zachariah Branch, who is as electric as it gets in college football. I think you just have, again, in a similar way that you have with Nussmeier, just a little more proven. You look at LSU, I mean, just more proven. I think Kyron Lacey, the way he played, I think it gets overshadowed by the two guys they're going to lose, but I thought he was really good last year, and same with CJ Daniels. And I also don't think you're giving up that much in the way of potential because you look at Chris Hilton Jr., I mean, he seems poised to have a big year, really talented, really good player. And obviously, I think Shelton Sampson and Aaron Anderson aren't giving up much either. So I think, again, you have a lot of potential in both rooms. I just think you've seen a lot more from LSU.
If you've been reading the LSU spring notes, it is the Kyron Lacey, Chris Hilton Jr. show. And I think you add a guy like CJ Daniels. That is a very talented wide receiver room. And I don't know if it's the USC sweatshirt. I don't know if it's the Zachariah Branch highlights that I've been watching. I'm going to go with USC's wide receiver room. And I'll tell you why. LSU fans, you can light me up in the comment section because I don't even know if I necessarily agree with what I'm about to say. Two really talented wide receiver rooms. Dill, I give USC the slight lean because I think the diversity of talent that you have is extremely special, right? You have guys like Deuce Robinson and a guy like Jacoby Lane who are just big-bodied matchup nightmares that can work vertically down the field. You have an elite route runner, Mekhi Lemon, who can separate against pretty much any defensive back that you see in college football. And then you arguably have the most impressive and explosive player in college football in Zachariah Branch, who, when you get the football to him in space, he is a guy that can make game-changing plays because of the different kind of bodies that you have in USC's wide receiver room, combined with all of these guys going into only year 2 of their college football careers. They were really good last year. I think you see a massive step in 2024. I'll give the slight lean to USC's wide receiver.
Branch is the X factor because, like, I feel like we've all forgotten about how electric he is. And a lot of it was like when USC started to fall off a little bit, more focused on the USC meltdown than like kind of some of the players. But Zachariah Branch, I mean, those first 2 games when he was getting the buzz I think he deserved, I mean, that's as impressive as I've seen a freshman play in just like the ability. If he gets the ball to take it the distance any second, it's really unique. I'm not sure there's anyone on LSU. And LSU's got some real stars too. I'm just not sure there's anyone in college football, frankly, who can match that electricity.
Some people forget Zachariah Branch. The ones who watch the highlights every day, myself, I remember Zachariah Branch. He's an absolute dog. Very excited about him. Going to the running back room, Dill, this one's tight. I'm going to give USC the lean because I like the depth a little bit more. I think you got some serious question marks about the depth in this LSU running back room. I wouldn't be surprised if LSU adds a running back in the transfer portal. You also have Caden Durham coming in the summer. I'll caveat saying that I think Quentin Joyner and Caleb Jackson are both in my notebooks as kind of year 2 breakout guys. But because I think you have a little bit more trust in the depth of the USC running back room, I'm going to give them the slight lean. But I think Caleb Jackson might be the best running back on the field heading into this matchup.
I think I agree with that. I just think Woody Marks and Quentin Joyner are the better tandem. And again, that's not me saying. I think kind of with you, Caleb Jackson, that game against Wisconsin, like that's what you want your running back to look like.
Yeah.
That explosiveness, that ability to get in and out of cuts and do it at the size he is as a freshman, really impressive. And we haven't frankly seen as much Quentin Joyner yet. But again, you kind of go back to that, Isaac. You go back to some of the traits he has. I mean, it's hard to say he's not going to be a really talented, really impressive back. So, again, we've seen more Caleb Jackson at this point, but I think the tandem and the upside with Joyner, I'm kind of with you. I think probably you lean USC.
I'll throw one more caveat, and if I start hearing during fall camp that Caden Durham's just running circles in fall camp, because he's a guy that was one of my favorite running backs in the 2024 class, I might switch my pick. But right now, sitting at April 3rd, I'll give it to USC. Going to the offensive line, this one's pretty easy for me. I don't know if there's a better unit in the country than what LSU has going into 2024. You have, 2 NFL tackles that would be playing on Sundays if they were old enough, and guys like Will Campbell and Emory Jones Jr. You look on the inside, you return both guards. DJ Chester might be an upgrade at the center position. There's no holes in this LSU offensive line. I think it's chock full with NFL talent. I'll go with LSU, but I do think USC's offensive line will be improved with some of the young talent that's kind of coming through the pipes.
Yeah, I mean, the way Elijah Page came on for USC, it does give you some confidence that they can be better. Because, again, that was a weak unit, I thought, last year. But some of those young guys, Alani Noah, you're kind of excited about, and Elijah Page stepping into that role and being a hammer. You like what USC has, but I'd take probably LSU's offensive line over anyone in the country. I'm kind of with it. It's just like that's such a complete unit, and they've been together now for a couple of years, and they're just starting to play in sync and as a unit. I mean,
that's an X factor. Like when you see those offensive lines going into like year 3 together, which this is what this group is doing, that's when you really start to see like really good offensive lines, kind of like what Michigan's was last year. And for USC, you do still have one big question at right tackle. I don't know if Mason Murphy's the answer. So that's something I'm monitoring. Real quick on the tight ends, like USC's in terms of like the talent that they have and the diversity of bodies that they have. I think Joey Olson's a guy that I'm really excited about as a true freshman. I think with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas moving on, I think you're going to see more of that true freshman Mason Taylor. You got Trey'Dez Green coming in, one of my favorite tight ends in that 2024 class. Give me LSU's tight ends, and I don't even know how much USC is going to use their tight ends because you want 4 wide receivers on the football field, but I'll go with LSU with a guy like Mason Taylor.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Mason Taylor just to me is at quite a bit higher level than anyone else in this tight end room and between these two teams. I don't see, you can't give it to USC. It's got to be LSU with Taylor.
All right, moving to the defensive side of the football, which is the most interesting conversation to have. We'll start on the defensive line. I'll give the first word. I have this USC defensive line with the injection of Eric Henderson. I am extremely excited about what this group looks like. Not only some additions through the transfer portal, guys like Isaiah Rakes and Nate Clifton, but you have some young talent that you're extremely excited about, right? Braylon Shelby going into year 2. I think Anthony Lucas, really hoping he breaks out going into year 3. You have guys like Bear Alexander, who I think is arguably the best defensive lineman that we'll see on the football field between both teams. You look at LSU, I think the big question mark is I like some of these guys. right? There are guys that I like in Braylon Swinson and Deshaun Womack. The depth on the inside is a massive question mark. You got to give this one to USC here.
Yeah, I go USC too. I just, again, like you kind of look, I think they did what they need to do in the portal, bringing those two guys in a little bit tougher, a little bit bigger. I mean, Isaiah Rakes, maybe not like shining the stuff, like maybe not the highlight guy you kind of look at, but such an important part of what a team wants to do on defense. And to bring him in to complement some of the other guys that you mentioned, like a Barry Alexander and a guy like Elijah Hughes, some of these guys who can really make more plays and do the things you want to see, but like you need guys like Rakes. I'm kind of with you. LSU just didn't bring in. I don't know who's the difference maker on the inside for them.
Yeah, and I think if you're LSU, you're hoping it's Dominic McKinley who gets in on the summer, but you're putting a lot of stock in a true freshman. Caveat to this one as well. I think both of these programs probably make an addition or two on the defensive line. So when we run this back in a month, the conversation might look a little bit different. But
LSU, I think you're right. I mean, Deshaun Womack looks like a guy who might really pop off and be that difference maker you need. You look elsewhere, I don't know who that other guy is. And in USC, I feel like it maybe has a couple.
And I think I gave a lot of credit to USC on the defensive line coaching front. I think LSU made a very good hire as well on the defensive line.
Jordan can coach, so it's like when he comes in, he gives.
Bo Davis, dude, 100%. You look at the linebacker room, Dill, and I love this linebacker room for LSU, and it was such a problem for USC last year. I think it gets better. Not only do you bring in Matt Entz, you bring in Easton Mascarenas-Arnold. I like Easton Mascarenas-Arnold. I really do like Eric Gentry. Mason Cobb needs to get better. He needs to kind of look like he did when he was with Oklahoma State. But you look at LSU, and you probably have the best football player on the field in Harold Perkins. I think Greg Penn is a phenomenal linebacker. I'm a massive fan of what we saw from true freshman Whit Weeks. This one has to go LSU's way.
You need such big steps in my mind for Mason Cobb and Eric Gentry to kind of get to the level, I think, where LSU feels like they're at in that linebacker room. So again, I like the coaching upgrades. I think they're going to play better football. But again, you're trying to make assumptions. I think LSU is going to not have an issue with their coaching staff, what they brought in with Blake Baker and company. So I think I like just where LSU's at a little bit more. But again, I mean, if Mason Cobb returns to where he was at Oklahoma State, and him and Mascarenas-Arnold could be a very dangerous duo.
I'll throw in Eric Gentry. I don't think there's a single player I'm most excited for on USC's team than Eric Gentry in terms of how does Dan Lynn decide to use someone like Eric Gentry, who's kind of a unicorn at that position. I don't think Alex Grinch had a damn clue how to use Eric Gentry. Really excited to see how he gets involved for this USC defense. But again, at LSU, proven talent. They got star power. You have to give them the lean. You look in the secondary, you got to go USC with what they did in the transfer portal. Both programs, I mean, you bring in Blake Baker, Dan Lynn, not many better coaches coaching up secondaries than those two guys. I think both of these programs take steps in the back end. But what USC did in the transfer portal, bringing in N'Keal Arnold and Kamari Ramsey, John Humphrey, DeCarlos Nicholson, I mean, that is a completely new starting secondary for USC with a lot of guys that I think will be playing in the NFL in the next couple of years. I'm going to go with USC, but LSU's got some young talent that you kind of hope takes that step in 2024.
Yeah, and that is kind of the difference. I mean, LSU's guys are young, really talented. The talent level, frankly, is probably not that different. It's just they brought in, that is USC, a whole starting four of guys who you're really comfortable with and have seen at a really high level. Again, we're making projections for what LSU could be. And given what they had at the defensive side of the ball coaching, there's probably a lot of projectable upside for this LSU. It's just you have to make it. And with LSU, or USC, I should say, and Dan Lynn coming in and also being a really good secondary guy, you're not making that much of a projection. I think that's going to be a really good secondary for USC.
And to touch on LSU before we kind of cap this one off, I am really excited about J.K. Johnson coming back from injury, Zy Alexander, and you have guys in Toviano and Ashton Stance. I think there's just more question marks right now, and I think we're going to get some answers to those questions before we see this game be played on the field. But right now, USC secondary, you have a lot of confidence in what you brought in. Dan Lynn, obviously, and Doug Belk, I think, was a really good hire as well. We'll wrap it up on that. We'll continue to look at this game from a lot of different angles over the next couple months. Again, let us hear it in the comment section, whether you agree, whether you disagree, whether you're getting into it with opposing fan bases. It's college football, baby. We love it. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.